Hello, fabulous humans. This is Susan. I'm here today to share with you some experiences I've had with nature journaling and phenology journaling and what the difference is, some resources if it's something you think you're interested in, and maybe some tips about why you would do this at all and what it has to do with atheopaganism. So we're here at my focus right now, and I have some examples of some of the nature journals I've kept before. This one here is a bullet journal that I happen to do some nature journaling within at some point. I've done this in many different notebooks over time, so I'm not going to show you all of them. I'm just going to show you some of my favorites. And some of the things that are in here, they're favorites for a reason, not just because I think they're pretty, but because there are certain aspects of nature journaling that I think maybe people overlook. They see online and lots of really pretty pictures on Instagram or wherever, Pinterest, that you might want to go on and get inspired by or repelled by and just intimidated by things. But I'm here to tell you that this can be a really rewarding thing to add to your practice, and it doesn't have to be pretty. The real point of doing this for me is to force me to get really close to nature. A lot of times people will, let's say you're going to go on a nature walk and you say, oh, well, that's a really pretty flower, and you might snap a photo of it. And maybe when you get home, you'll look up what kind of flower it is. And that's often the extent to which people take their curiosity with a flower or a new bird or creature or tree, whatever it is. Once we learn the name of something, it's very typical of humans to just kind of end there. And nature journaling, what it really does is forces you to slow down and really observe, because if you're trying to draw something, and especially if you're going to try and draw it up close. For example, here you can see I've drawn these flowers. These are cosmos from my backyard. I've drawn it far away. This is kind of what it looks like as a general, bush of flowers. Here's what it looks like up close. Here's what it looks like on the stem and integral with other pieces of the same plant. A really, really close-up thing here of the center of the tiny little flower. I'm hoping you can see that and that this focuses well. What it really got me to do is get really intimate with this particular flower, and I know so much more about it from having done this process and taken the time than I would have if I just looked and said, oh, that's a really pretty flower, and continued on my way. Some of the things that you might want to draw in here are details or a bigger picture of where its environment is and how it is integral to its environment. Or you would incorporate lots of text too. And if you're not as much of a visual person, it's totally fine if most of your nature journal is text. So for example, here I wrote visitors, lots and lots of bumblebees. Also other native bees and insects that I've not ID'd. I have on other occasions witnessed bumblebees using these flowers as overnight beds. So that's something that I didn't take the time to draw here, but it's something I've saved for years and years. This was in 2020, and now we're in 2023. So for 3 years, I've had this note, and I can look back and say, oh, that's right, I do remember that. And it's a good way to slow down and take a moment to really be with nature and make those kinds of observations. I had to sit down and take a lot of time to make these drawings, and so I got to witness the bumblebee visitors. So this is one example of a nature journal. A phenology journal can be a little bit different. The point of a phenology journal, at least for me, is less about getting to know a specific plant really in depth and more about tracking changes from year to year I don't really have a good example to show you of a phenology journal, and that can really be a place that you can start if you're just completely turned off by the idea of drawing anything and it's just very scary. And that may be still something that's interesting to you because it helps you connect with nature on sort of a different level, on more of a broad level, but still gives you the feeling of intimacy where you can start to expect, oh, well, I'm starting to see crocus come up in the spring, and that means it's probably only going to be a few more weeks before the lilac blooms, or whatever it is in your climate and your conditions and where you live. Those just happen to be things that, I notice year to year in springtime. There's a specific order in which certain flowers bloom and certain things start to come alive in the spring. And that's really interesting and deepening for my practice to observe that from year to year. And that's something you can do in a phenology journal, just writing notes down and not worrying about pictures. It's just more of a timeline, whereas nature journaling, at least by my very official Susan definition, is more about taking very longer chunks of time to get to know certain plants very specifically. And it doesn't have to be plants. Most of my examples in these books are going to be plants because plants sit still and they're easy to observe. But before I go, I wanted to show you a couple of other examples and some other things you might be interested in including in your nature journals. So here we've already seen this page where there's lots of color. I've used watercolors here. I've used fancy pens, a pencil. This is watercolor with colored pencils on top. You don't have to use any of that stuff if you don't want to. Here on this next page, this is just ink and pencil line drawings. And I just didn't have enough time. I had my toddler with me at the time. So I wrote a note, watched a mole for several minutes. It was able to shuffle underneath the leaf litter without surfacing except once or twice. So I have these notes about the experiences that happened while I was drawing when I didn't necessarily have the time to actually draw it because I had a small one with me and I didn't even have time to apply any color, and that's fine. I've got some notes over here about the shapes of these ferns that I was drawing. Just anything that you can note for yourself for later, or whatever you think is interesting and what you want to learn more about is something you should include. For example, on these pages, I have some notes about this goldenrod here. I have these questions. Buds are closed and were closed outside. Are they spent, or is this just as open as they get? It's fine if you don't know the answers to these things. I've got another question over here about the colors of these goldenrods matching that of the dandelions and other flowers around. Is that something that pollinators are really drawn to? Is that why they're all the same color? And it's fine to ask those things and not know them right away. It's a good way to make notes for later. For this one, this is an oak leaf from my backyard. And I've got some notes of fungal spots, not as bad as 2 years ago. So even though I haven't drawn this oak leaf 2 years ago to compare, I still have those mental notes. So it is a little bit like a phenology journal in that way. So again, you don't have to get this fancy. I have this other one down here. This is part of a bullet journal, so it's not just a dedicated journal. It's to show you that you can do this as part of your normal journaling if you do something, or you're just a notebook that you carry around. I just drew some flowers that happened to be around that day. Or here's another one where I've almost done no drawing and I've just made a list of some birds that we saw and this one particular flower that I had not yet identified. And you can do something like this if all you can, manage in the time you have, or with the skill level of drawing that you have, is to just do a little quick sketch. And a quick sketch can be more informative than an artistic drawing if you're detailing it out. Think about like a scientific notebook of what would you be labeling and what's of interest and what do you want to learn about. Excuse me. And the last thing I want to share with you is most of what I have learned about nature journaling has come from this book, The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. If you can get it from the library, it's a great resource. There's lots of different ideas about not only how to draw. There is a big chunk of the book that is a how to draw book, but the first part of the book is things that you should think about including. And it's, ideas about include things and how they change over time. And it's really a good guide to how to think about nature journaling and some ideas of what you could get out of it. So that's just a quick primer to nature journaling and why you might want to do it, some things you can include, and hopefully it's something that you might want to incorporate into your practice. I know for me it has been really rewarding, one, just to have that quiet time in nature, and I can think my own thoughts while I am drawing and while I'm writing, and it's just a time where I'm really just focused on the world around me, and it's very peaceful, and I really feel like it has helped me grow as a person and in my practice. So enjoy, and I hope to see you around next time.